Welcome back to another episode of the CS Podcast presented by the NFL Draft Bible, NFLDraftBible.com, bringing you the names that you need to know first since 2002. Visit NFLDraftBible.com, give them a follow on Twitter at NFL Draft Bible, and the 2018 NFL Draft is officially over, and to help me break down the Chicago Bears 2018 draft class, of course, they held the number 8 overall pick and made a handful of other selections as well throughout the 7-round NFL draft. It's a pleasure to welcome on to the show. If we're talking Chicago Bears, there's a good chance we always have this guy on. He's from BearReport.com. Give him a follow on Twitter at Aaron Leming. And with that said, Aaron Leming joins the show now. Aaron, how's everything going, man?
Doing good, man. Doing good. It's been a little bit, like we're talking right before we went on. It's lots happened since we last talked.
Yeah, the last time we had you on the show was the day or two after the Chicago Bears announced Matt Nagy as their new head coach. And to say that this team looks totally different now on paper would be an understatement with the free agent acquisitions and now, of course, the 2018 NFL Draft being in the books. And let's start off right there, Aaron. Let's start off with the 2018 NFL Draft. They stay put at number 8, although there's been some discussion that they did try to move up, probably to grab Bradley Chubb when he kind of fell there a little bit to number 5 to Denver. But in the end, they did stay put, number 8 overall, and they select Roquan Smith, the linebacker out of Georgia. And this wasn't too much of a surprise, especially seeing Quentin Nelson, the offensive guard out of Notre Dame, go off the board, number 6 overall to Indianapolis. How do you feel about the linebacker from Georgia, the newest member of the Bears, Roquan Smith, in round 1?
I thought it was a good pick. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the biggest thing that I'm still trying to adjust to is the fact that Ryan Pace, is a best player available type of GM when he's drafting, and obviously that's a little subjective because you look at some of the quarterbacks, whatever it may be. He's not going to take another quarterback, but I think when you look at what he did, he could have reached for a position of need or a higher position of need, more to the point, like a pass rusher. He could have gone with somebody like Marcus Davenport, but I think he made the right pick here. I think really the only other logical pick would have been like a Minkah Fitzpatrick or maybe a Derwin James, but I think when you look at what they need and relative to value, I think that Roquan Smith made a lot of sense. I think this is somebody who profiles as kind of like that Patrick Willis type that Vic Fangio had in his defense in San Francisco, but overall, he's a little undersized. He's very fast, very instinctive, and I think that's the biggest thing when you look at the difference between him and Tremaine Edmunds. Was Edmunds is bigger, just about as fast, stronger, only 19 years old, about to be 20. But the big thing with Edmunds is the fact that his instincts really lacked, and I think that's something when you look at Roquan Smith that's just there. He's used to being the quarterback of the defense, and I think that's something that the Bears could really use. I know a lot of people looked at inside linebacker and said, okay, maybe this isn't quite a huge need for this team, but I think when you really look at it, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like the Leonard Floyd pick a few years ago when they had Willie Young, Pernell McPhee, and Lamar Houston there. It didn't really seem like much of a need, but we saw how little of time elapsed before that became a big pick for the Bears. And obviously he's their number 1 outside linebacker. And I think we're going to see a similar situation with Roquan Smith. So I think this pick made a lot of sense. And I think the most important thing is he was the most talented non-quarterback on the board for the Bears at 8.
Now, this is just a hypothetical question, but if Quentin Nelson was there at number 8, do you think they go that route, or do they stay put and go with Roquan Smith still?
I think they go with Roquan Smith. Personally, I would have gone with Quentin Nelson just because I had him graded higher. But at the same time, at least listening to Ryan Pace talk, he kind of did his media rounds today. He was on the Score earlier, and then he was on the Hogan Johns podcast, and I really think, at least from what he said and everything that I've heard, it's just, this Roquan Smith was their guy, and I think they were even willing to move up a little bit to get him. But the way things broke, especially after seeing what happened with Indy, obviously Quentin Nelson went, and then he said he talked to Brandon Beane, the Bills GM, and knew that they were going to move up to 7. Or maybe it was Jason Lick, the Bucks GM. But either way, he talked to one of those guys and basically knew that Roquan Smith was going to fall to them. And So I really think that Roquan Smith was kind of the guy either way, and I mean it makes a lot of sense. Ryan Pace has always identified his guy in the draft. We've seen it the last few years. Mitch Trubisky traded up for Leonard Floyd, traded up for Kevin White was always his guy as well. So I think that he's very realistic about who's going to be there, and at least everything that he said. I mean they've been very unanimous on their evaluation of Roquan Smith, and they felt good about where he's at, and that was their guy.
And you look at the first-round picks the past 3 years since Ryan Pace has been the general manager of the Chicago Bears. He goes Kevin White that first year. Obviously, that hasn't panned out for a couple of different reasons, injury being the main reason there. The second year, he trades up and gets Leonard Floyd, the pass rusher, out of the University of Georgia at number 9 overall, I believe, 9, maybe 10 overall. And then last year, he goes with Mitch Trubisky, number 2 overall. All kind of maybe not necessarily project guys, Aaron, but guys that may not have been necessarily ready to step in right away and have a big impact on the team year one. That doesn't seem the case with this pick with Roquan Smith. This seems like a guy that can strap it up day one and be ready to go.
I agree, and I think we kind of saw a common theme within the first few rounds of the draft, their first few picks, where I think Ryan Pace is feeling more comfortable with the talent that he has on the roster. I think he's got the right coach. He's got his coach that he really wanted, and I think that's big. And I think just looking at how the roster's kind of laid out. I mean, obviously he came in 2015, has really just tore down the whole entire thing. Started bringing in his new guys starting in 2015, and really it's kind of been a building process since. But I think really there was 2 things that signified him being ready to go, and I think one was obviously making the move for a quarterback and Trubisky, and then I think 2 was getting John Fox out. I think that John Fox, I do believe that he was a Ryan Pace hire, but I do think that as things have progressed, he kind of served his purpose in terms of getting the culture turned around. And I mean, it was a mess after Trestman left. I mean, there's really no other way around that. But I think Ryan Pace has built in these 3 years prior to this offseason what he's wanted to accomplish. And I think it's really all kind of coming to a head right now. And obviously, I mean, we got to see how things work out. Maybe it's a little premature to think that they're a playoff contender this year. But I do think that this is easily the most talented roster Ryan Pace has had. And I mean, these are really all his guys for the most part. And I think that's a big thing. So I think we've kind of seen with some of these draft picks, especially earlier on, a guy like Roquan Smith, maybe I think he still has a high ceiling for sure, but definitely a much higher floor than we're used to seeing Pace take in the first round.
Again, we're chatting with Aaron Leming, BearReport.com. Give him a follow on Twitter at Aaron Leming. Moving to day 2 of the NFL draft, they go with James Daniels, the offensive lineman out of Iowa. Some guys had him rated as their number 1 center in the entire NFL draft, and it sounds like he'll be playing guard to start off his career. And then they went back and traded back into the second round. They did not have a third-round pick. They trade a second and a fourth to New England to trade up to get to the 51st overall pick in the second round and grab Anthony Miller, wide receiver out of Memphis. Your thoughts on those 2 picks? And it also sounds like these 2 guys can have an immediate impact on the offense in year 1 as well.
Well, I think we're really kind of seeing a trend within these first 3 picks for the Bears, and I think that's really, like I said, higher floors but still high ceilings. And I think you look at a guy like, let's just start off with James Daniels. I mean, he was their second pick there, and I think a lot of people are a little surprised that he was still there, myself included. At least what I remember reading before the draft had kind of kicked off, the week of the draft, and the rumors were flying around, was saying that there was going to be a big run on interior offensive linemen in the first round, and we really didn't see that. And I think everything kind of broke well for the Bears because a guy like Ragnow went in the first round, and Billy Price went in the first round. But then we kind of saw how things were shaping up, and really, Will Hernandez still being there going into the second round, I think was a big value for the Bears, just for the simple fact that he's more of a power scheme type of guy. He doesn't really fit what the Bears are trying to do with the more athletic zone blocking type players, especially on the interior. So I think a guy like Daniels falling to them at 39 was big because I had a first round grade on him. He was my second overall center. I thought Billy Price was a slightly better prospect, even with the injury that he's going to be good to go for. But I think overall, I mean, this is just a fantastic pick for them to have, and I had two big needs highlighted for them moving into the draft, and one was going to be edge rusher, and then the second was interior lineman. And I think especially when you move on from a guy like Josh Sitton, a little on the older side, hasn't been overly healthy, but I think at the same time, you really have to have. I mean, there's been so much focus on the pass catchers and the positional players like that you also had to put somewhat of a focus on the offensive line. And Harry Hiestan's coming in from Notre Dame. He's one of the better offensive line coaches in college or the pros, but at the same time, I wasn't overly comfortable with seeing Jordan Morgan and Eric Kush fight it out for the left guard spot. So I think this is a nice move for them. Really fell in, and I think my absolute favorite pick in the draft is Anthony Miller. I think and my initial reaction as well was that it was kind of a steep price, trading a future second and a fourth, and then I started really thinking about it. It's like you're basically giving up a fourth round pick, which the Bears had two of. For the right to be able to basically, take your second round pick from next year and move it up a year. And I think especially when you look at what the Bears have done at receiver, they added, they've added some pieces, Allen Robinson, Taylor Gabriel. They've made some smaller signings, Benny Fowler, stuff like that. But I think letting Cam Meredith walk when they didn't match, I think really left a big hole at receiver for them. But I do think that Anthony Miller is a perfect fit, and I had kind of identified this before the draft, a perfect fit in Matt Nagy's offense. And I think that you look at it, and he's 5'11", he's not overly big, he's got big hands, he's got a pretty big wingspan for being 5'11", ran 4.46 at his pro day, didn't really test at the combine and all. But I think overall, when you look at who he is as a receiver, very, very aggressive guy. I mean, he was a walk-on at Memphis, has really had to work for everything that he's had. From a talent standpoint alone, I think he was a top 3 receiver in this draft. I think really my only knock on him outside of being a little on the short side, not being extremely fast, was the fact that he's about to be 24 years old. So outside of that, I think you really look at what they've done, on the offense in day 2, and I think it's a big value. And now you look at the receiving group that they have there. You look at the offensive line group is a little bit younger. I think the biggest thing with the offensive line is the fact that they now have Cody Whitehair, and now they're going to have James Daniels, who are going to be on rookie contracts for a few years, which is definitely going to help because you just paid Leno. You're already paying Long. Bobby Massey's going in the last year of his deal, and he's making about $6 million a year. So I think really being cost controlled and having some youth on that line is a big deal.
Are they making the right decision? And I got to think, it seems like Matt Nagy and really his entire coaching staff, Vic Fangio, Harry Hiestan, Mark Helfrich, everybody, it seems like they've kind of had a little input. Like you said, Ryan Pace was on making his media rounds this morning on all types of different platforms. And it sounds like, from what he's saying, not only did Matt Nagy also have input in this draft, but really the entire coaching staff. What do you make of the decision of Daniels beginning his career at least at guard and keeping Whitehair at center?
I think to a certain extent, it makes some sense. I'll be completely honest. I think by the time week 1 rolls around, I do think that Daniels is going to be inside at center and Whitehair is going to kick out the guard. But I think this is one of those things they're trying to keep some continuity with Trubisky at this point, because you have to look at the receiver situation right now, and in his top 3 targets at least are going to be guys that he's never thrown to before. And I think so keeping some continuity at the center position could make some sense. And I think Cody Whitehair probably prefer to be at center at this point, but it's also worth keeping in mind that they did draft him originally to be a guard until they signed Sitton right before the season back in, 2016, I want to say. I think that sounds right. But either way, I think when you look at the situation, I think versatility is a big thing for their interior offensive linemen. Ryan Pace said that as much today. But at the same time, I think that James Daniels is going to be a better center. I think he's got the athletic ability to really get to the second level. Almost sometimes he gets to the second level a little too fast. But I think he's more about speed and technique than he really is about strength. So I think that overall, I think putting him at center, I think he's a little bit better of a snapper anyway. Cody Whitehair had some issues with shotgun snaps last year, and the Bears didn't really run that many of them, and especially within Matt Nagy's new offense that the Bears are going to have, I mean, there's going to be a lot of shotguns. At least that's the way it was in Kansas City. So I think we're ultimately going to see a flip. But either way, I mean, you've got to get these guys developed, and I think, for Daniels especially, there's going to have to be some strength added there. But I think keeping him at center, ultimately keeping him at center, is probably going to be the best move. But that position versatility is definitely going to be big.
Few more minutes with Aaron Leming of BearReport.com here on the CS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Shanafelt. And Aaron, moving on to day 3 of the NFL draft, they kick off round 4 by drafting the linebacker out of Western Kentucky, Joel Iabunier. I hope I pronounced that right. But anyways, this was kind of a pick I think a lot of people were kind of thrown off by maybe. I mean, it's not really a prospect that was on many people's radar, and Ryan Pace said this morning, at that point he was the best player available, so another inside linebacker for the Chicago Bears in this draft. It sounds as if he could have an immediate impact on special teams. At least that's what's going to be expected of him right away. And again, they're looking at him as an inside linebacker, but if need be, it almost sounds like he can play outside linebacker. Now, he doesn't bring the size you would want at outside linebacker, but it sounds like he does have some experience there, although this past season, his senior year, was his best of his collegiate career, and that was inside linebacker. So what do you know about this linebacker from Western Kentucky, and what should we expect from him, at least here in year 1?
Well, I'll be honest, I know very little about him. Really going into the draft, I hadn't even heard of the guy.
You're not alone.
It's funny because I was in a group chat with probably about 20-25 people, and the pick was made, and everybody unanimously was kind of like, "Who's this guy? None of us had ever heard of him." But doing a little bit of background work, and the thing with Iggy that is kind of throwing me off is there's very little to actually see of the guy coming out of Western Kentucky. Being a small school guy, there's really not that much on him. So what I've had to really do is kind of default to people I trust, and people I trust evaluation more to the point, and kind of seeing. And it's weird because the people who actually know about him really like the pick, and I think this is one of those small school projects that Ryan Pace has been using the last few years, especially in the mid rounds, and I really think this kind of goes the same way. A little small, definitely quick, instinctive as well. Kind of like Roquan Smith. Obviously, not nearly as safe of a floor, and probably not as high of a ceiling. Like I said, smaller guy, does have some versatility, but I think the biggest thing is, I mean, he's got a lot of speed, and the instincts are there. So I think he's just kind of one of those guys that's more of I guess you could say, I mean, he's definitely a project. And like you said, I think he's going to start off on special teams, but I also think this is kind of a move for the future. Last year we saw a few different small school guys go, Tariq Cohen, Adam Shaheen, Jordan Morgan, and these guys were more geared as picks towards the future. And I think this is another pick that's more geared towards the future. They had a high grade on him. They think a lot of him, but he's also somebody that's going to have the ability to kind of sit back as that third or fourth inside linebacker and develop. And I think that's going to be a big thing because you got Trevathan, who's got 2 years left on his contract. Nick Kwiatkowski, they obviously like enough to keep him on the roster and give him a shot, but at the same time, they obviously don't feel comfortable enough with him being a starter. So I'm thinking that this is probably a move more towards, 2019, 2020, to where either he or Nick Kwiatkowski can step in and, compete for that starting linebacker spot after Trevathan leaves. But overall thoughts, I really don't have too much. That's just one of those pace picks that you have to trust. And I mean, he's been really good in the 4th and the 5th round for the most part. So it's just to me kind of one of those. It's a surprise to a lot of people, and we're just going to have to see how it goes.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, last year he drafted, I believe, not only Tariq Cohen, but Eddie Jackson as well in the 4th round. So we'll see if he can get his money's worth out of Iggy. His nickname is the linebacker out of Western Kentucky. Again, 4th round pick. And then they stuck to the defensive side of the ball in rounds 5 and 6. Bilal Nichols, the defensive lineman out of Delaware, Matt Nagy's alma mater. And round 6, Kylie Fitz, the edge rusher out of Utah. Any initial thoughts?
I think, this is kind of where you get into the projection aspect. I think there was definitely some good players on the board that they bypassed, and obviously those guys kind of fell a little bit. Duke Ejiofor was one of them. Josh Sweat was another guy for me. There was multiple guys that I would have preferred in that situation, but obviously no NFL team did because a lot of those guys continue to fall. But I think when you look at Nichols, I think he's more of one of those guys that he can play 5-tech. I think he's going to be better off as a 3-tech in sub packages, which is great because that's what they run about 70% of the time. Definitely, another kind of small school guy. It's going to be a little bit of a project, but I do think that he can move into that rotation, and there's some added depth to our defensive line. And I think when you look at the towards their sixth pick there, Kylie Fitz is one of those guys for me that I put a decent amount of look into him, and I think the biggest thing is durability. I think he's got to stay healthy. Overall, he tested well. There's really no way around that. He tested very well, but durability is going to be a big thing. He's a bigger guy. He's a strong guy. So if he can stay on the field, then that's going to be a big plus for him. And he's got a high ceiling, but I think the floor is also somewhat low for him, just for the simple fact, like I said, the durability aspect. We've seen it with Bears rookies in the past and these young guys. It's very hard to develop at the NFL level if you can't stay healthy. So I think the biggest thing for him is going to be health. If so, I think he can be a nice number 3. I think they're really thin at outside linebacker right now. They have obviously Leonard Floyd and Aaron Lynch on a 1-year deal, but Lynch really hasn't done much. And outside of that, they got Acho. So he's going to get his snaps this year, and he's going to get a chance. So it would be a big value if they were able to get something out of a 6th-round pick. And he's a guy that can do it, but it's just going to be a matter of staying healthy.
And then moving on to round 7, they take another Georgia Bulldog and Javon Wims, a nice size wide receiver, 6'2", 215, ran a 4.5 40, and was certainly Georgia's top receiver this past season. This almost seems like kind of like these other last 2 picks in Nichols and Fitz, kind of like a project guy, and maybe not necessarily a very raw prospect, but certainly a guy that you don't really expect too much the first couple of years. But if you could get some decent snaps, if he needs to come in as a rotation player at receiver, you're going to look for him to have somewhat of an impact on special teams. Is there anything you want to touch on with Wims?
I think he's like a height, weight, and speed kind of guy. I think when you really look at him, he's tall, he's long, he's a possession guy. He's not very fast, but he is a good vertical threat just because, like I said, it's height, weight, and speed really is a big thing. But I think with Wims, it's going to be a developmental curve in terms of route running. He's not a very good route runner. But at this point in the draft, you're kind of drafting for projects at this point. So, nothing really big, but I think, for Bears fans to kind of keep this in mind, this is the kind of pick that will keep Josh Bellamy off the field on the, as a receiver. So I think anything at this point is probably a good thing. And, added depth is never a bad thing, especially when you have a guy like Kevin White who can't stay healthy.
You got that right. One more thing for you before we let you go, Aaron. Really appreciate your time. So we kind of touched on all of the draft picks for the Chicago Bears in the 2018 NFL Draft. Any undrafted free agents that the Bears signed following the draft that really stick out to you that may have a chance at making the final roster?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a few that really stood out to me, and a lot of them are at corner. I think Kevin Tolliver is definitely the top name there. I had a 3rd-round grade on him. Maybe that was a little high coming out of the gate, but I think he's somebody that definitely makes some sense, especially when you look at their depth. You've got your 3 starters with Fuller, Amukamura, and then probably Bryce Callahan out of the slot. And then really after that, you got Marcus Cooper, who is not really locked into a roster spot at this point, and then some depth guys in the slot. But you don't really have many outside guys, especially youth. So I think he could make some sense there. I think Michael Joseph out of Dubeck's another one. He's kind of more of he's going to be a project. He's coming from D3, but he's had 14 interceptions the last 2 years. He could definitely make some sense. And then the other guy that really kind of stands out to me that could actually be a very interesting fit that I'm curious to see how it's all going to work is going to be Ryan Nall out of Oregon State. He's a running back. Big guy. Is actually surprisingly quick for how big he is. He can play fullback, he can play running back, he can play tight end. He's kind of that Swiss Army knife type guy, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the Bears are going to use the running backs this year. Matt Nagy usually has a fullback, and they have a fullback on the roster, Michael Burton. But at the same time, it's going to be It's going to be interesting to see, do they keep 3 or 4 running backs in a fullback, or is Null a guy that can slot in one of those positions and essentially save a roster spot, but still come in the short yardage situations and still have value as a blocker or a pass catcher, whatever it may be.
Again, for those of you tuning in and you don't already follow Aaron or you're not familiar with Aaron, be sure to give him a follow on Twitter at Aaron Leming, AARONLEMING, and check out his work and the great work they do over at Bear Report at bearreport.com. Aaron, I can't let you go without asking you about your guy from Oklahoma going number 1 overall to the Browns, Baker Mayfield. Is he gonna? Did Cleveland finally get this quarterback situation right?
I think, I'm a big Oklahoma fan. I'm a big Baker Mayfield fan. I'm not sure I would have taken him number 1 overall, but at the same time, I think this quarterback class is a little closer than a lot of people think. Josh Rosen was my number 1 guy. I understand he's got some character concerns. So I think overall, I think they did make the right move. It's just, man, I have a hard time trusting anything that Hugh Jackson does with quarterbacks right now. So I'm hoping for Baker Mayfield's sake that Todd Haley will obviously help, but I'm hoping for his sake that it's just kind of a John Fox type situation where this year he's going to be there. It'll be a little bit better of a situation, but I'm hoping he gets a new coach next year. But man, I'll tell you what, the jump that he made from 2016 to 2017 in terms of being a prospect and mechanics and everything else that goes with it was astronomical, because this time last year I had probably a 4th or 5th round grade on him and didn't really think that he was going to project well as an NFL quarterback. But I mean, he could be a Drew Brees type quarterback. I don't agree with the Russell Wilson type comparisons, but in terms of Drew Brees, the athleticism is a little overhyped. But man, he's somebody that you don't want to bet against. He walked on 2 different schools and won both starting jobs and was a great quarterback with Oklahoma. And I think he can continue that with the right coaching. Yeah,
first ever walk on to go number 1 overall in the NFL draft. Aaron, really appreciate your time. Always fun chatting with you. Any final words? Again, please let our listeners know where they can check out your work at.
Yeah, you can find me at bearreport.com. We just merged with 24/7 Sports, which is an entity of CBS. So got a lot of great writers over there. Myself, Jeremy Stoltz, and Zach Pearson, and of course Matt Urich. So you can find all my work over there. We do that, and we do podcasts, and we've always churning out good content.
Hey, keep up the great work. Next thing you know, we'll be in Bourbonnais.
Absolutely, man.